And I would like to give a rousing, rocking Recovery Reinvented welcome to our First Lady, the most courageous First Lady in North Dakota. Here she is.
Well, good morning, everyone. I'm so grateful to have an incredibly supportive partner. Thanks so much, Doug. I came out here thinking that, geez, with all that, how am I going to live up to that? The bar is here, so here I go. So welcome to Recovery Reinvented. I'm really overwhelmed with gratitude to be with you today, both online and here at Minot State University. I can't believe this is our 7th Recovery Reinvented. Maybe because I don't think I look 7 years older, but Doug's got a few more gray hairs. So how many of you are joining us for the first time? Go ahead and raise your hand. Awesome. How many of you have been here for all 7 Recovery Reinvented? Awesome. So whether you've been with us since the beginning or you're joining us for the first time, we are so grateful to you for making time for us today. You're making an investment that could help save lives, maybe even your own. So when I became First Lady of North Dakota 7 years ago, I was asked by a reporter in an interview why I chose the mission to eliminate the stigma of addiction. And I responded, because it affects me personally. I've been in recovery from alcohol addiction for 15 years. Thank you. Up to that point, I hardly had spoken about it. Hardly anyone knew because I never talked about it. The shame and stigma kept me silent. Just like the shame and stigma kept me from reaching out for help for decades. Around the time of that interview, I heard my good friend and mentor, William Moyers of Hazelden Betty Ford, say, "The quickest, easiest, cheapest way to eliminate stigma is talk. Talking about the disease of addiction will reduce the stigma because stigma is a barrier that prevents people from reaching out for help and from connecting to life-saving resources." So William's message inspired me to start speaking publicly about my story, and really was the motivation for the creation of Recovery Reinvented. And I would not be standing in front of you today if not for my recovery. Today, I have now been in recovery from alcohol addiction for over 21 years. And Recovery Reinvented started as a conference, but it's really turned into a movement in our state, with a primary focus on eliminating the stigma of addiction. Now, in addition to the Recovery Reinvented conference, there's been many other initiatives and programs that have been launched over the years, including the Office of Recovery Reinvented was created by executive order by the governor. The Youth Ending Stigma, or the YES Challenge, provided grants to schools for student-led initiatives and projects focused on eliminating the social stigma that surrounds behavioral health issues, including addiction and mental health conditions. We had an Innovate Recovery competition that was focused on expanding addiction support recovery services in North Dakota. Family support groups were created to help families in crisis because of addiction. The stigma surveys were launched, which the governor already spoke about. Recovery community organizations were created and started across the state. In fact, the first RCO in our state is called The Door, and it was started by one of the tribes we share geography with, MHA Nation. And then we've been focusing on helping companies build recovery-friendly workplaces. And when we held our first Recovery Reinvented 7 years ago, I had no idea if it would make a lasting difference. I hoped more people would begin talking about addiction and that people would begin to celebrate recovery. Yeah. Which is what we should be doing a lot more of. And that we might finally start addressing the stigma that's quite literally killing people. Recovery Reinvented is an event that has touched thousands of people across our nation and around the world. And we continue to hold it every year because we believe in the long-term change it creates. We recognize this change doesn't happen in a day, but events like this can act as a catalyst for people to become energized and to take their ideas and bring them back to their own communities. 6 years ago, after the governor delivered his State of the State address from this very stage, I had the privilege of meeting Dr. Kevin Harmon and several students from Minot State University. And they told me that a group of them had gotten together and they had attended our first Recovery Reinvented event. And they were inspired by two speakers that we had that year, Holly Sherman and Sharon Weber, who shared how they were revolutionizing college campuses by creating safe and strong, sober living environments where students could find recovery and succeed in the classroom. So those students came back here to Minot State and shared the value of what they had learned. And they enlisted their compassionate, supportive administration and began to drive their own sober living environment right here at Minot State. That makes me so happy. And this is really what Recovery Reinvented is all about. You take inspiration from what you all hear today and to those of you online and bring that energy and that compassion and the commitment to create stigma-free communities in your home, your workplace, your college campuses, and beyond. Yay. Through Recovery Reinvented and the innovative work of our behavioral health team, which let me tell you, most states want to hire our behavioral health team because of the innovative work they do that's really above and beyond most other states. The governor and I have actually had the opportunity to promote North Dakota to the nation. We've had seats at the table in federal conversations and meetings for many different initiatives and conversations around building recovery-supportive workplaces, criminal justice reform, reentry programs, and addressing the opioid crisis and many others. Even though so many initiatives and meetings have taken place across our nation, our country is in a behavioral health crisis that was worsened by the pandemic. Suicide rates are up. 110,000 people are dying of overdoses every year. And stigma still exists in government, healthcare, the insurance industry, court systems, schools, businesses, to name just a few. So there's still a lot of work to do. Eliminating the stigma of addiction is a core solution for so many of these issues and problems. But being here on this college campus makes me think about how different my life would have been if I had the mental health and addiction services and support when I was in high school. So my journey with addiction started when I was in high school. I had my first blackout from drinking alcohol in high school. I'm from Jamestown, North Dakota. I'm a Blue Jay, go Blue Jays. In high school, I was, regular teenager. I looked like I had everything on the outside. I had a lot of friends. I was involved in a lot of activities, honor student, tennis, lots of things. But I constantly had these voices in my head telling me that I was stupid, that I made mistakes, and that I needed to be perfect. And my family's very Scandinavian. I'm a descendant of Vikings, and I like that. And my ancestors were traders and warriors. So my family didn't sit around the dinner table and talk about our feelings or our struggles or ask for help. How many of you can relate to that? No. And in school, I didn't know how to deal with my struggles of depression, anxiety. And there were many days that I didn't want to get out of bed, and I didn't really know why. When I took my first drink in high school, those voices disappeared in my head. Drinking was the answer to all my problems. And when I became a senior in high school, I was trying to decide where will I go to college? And usually those decisions are based on what kind of schools have the best programs or the best extracurricular activities. I based my decisions mostly on two things. I was looking for a college that was a party school, where the party was the priority, and I could drink freely without restrictions. And I was also looking for a college that was far from home. So that led me to choose Arizona State University. It was on the top 10 party school list all the time, and the weather was a bonus. Well, I'm now a proud graduate of Arizona State, and I would like to clarify that I've been back to that campus many times as First Lady, and I've met with students and faculty that are focused on creating supportive recovery environments. And President Michael Crow has guided a culture shift that reinvented Arizona State University from a party school to a model 21st century university. But back in my college days, and really after, every decision I made was tied to drinking. I wouldn't even think of going to a function if there wasn't alcohol if I knew that alcohol wouldn't be there. My drinking put me in many dangerous and ultimately risky situations, and that led me to a 20-year struggle of drunken nights, shameful episodes, and a feeling that maybe my life had no worth. Those 20 years were hell. I felt constant shame because of my behavior, and I kept thinking that I could fix myself or that I was good at hiding my addiction. I'd get sober for 6 months, and then I'd start drinking again. I'd get sober for a year, and I'd start drinking, and this kept happening over a period of about 8 years. And at the end of that, I was suicidal every time I drank. You know, I could do anything in my life. I could accomplish any goal, but I could not stop drinking. Guilt and shame were my constant companions, and they were with me everywhere I went, including where I worked. In my career, I worked in many different industries as a human resources professional. One position I held was a human resources manager for a printing company that had 3 shifts of workers. And I was deep in my addiction when I was there. Safety was a high priority at this company because there were so many machines involved in the printing process. It was my job to provide drug testing before hiring people. Also my job to fire people when they didn't pass a drug test. And when I worked there, I was arrested for driving while intoxicated, DWI. And the local newspaper printed information about people who were arrested for DUIs in that city. This was the public shaming for the disease of addiction that is really no longer happening in most newspapers across our country. Well, one of the employees at that place where I worked, the printing company, copied the posting of my DUI and posted it all over the plant where I worked. I can't tell you, I still think about it to this day, you know, like how devastated I was. And the shame was overwhelming. But I get it. I get why they did that. Well, it was many years later when I decided I needed help for treatment. I needed treatment and help for my struggles with addiction. At that point, I had a good job, but I was literally hanging on by a thread, trying to keep my life together while deep in my addiction. It was hard to go to work every day, hungover, trying to hide the hangover, drinking every day after work, and going through the same cycle every day. And I realized I needed to have a conversation with my team leader. And, let her know that I needed help. I was terrified. I was terrified to talk about it because I'd never admitted, that I needed help. I asked her to lunch, and I thought about canceling it like 1,000,000 times. And when the day finally came, I remember sitting there, and I was talking to her, and I was just staring into my lap. And I felt so small and hopeless. My mind was racing, and I was filled with so much shame. I couldn't even look at her. I took a deep breath, and I opened up about how addiction was taking over my life. And I knew I needed help from my addiction. I knew I needed treatment. And the tears were streaming down my face, and I was bracing myself for a look of disdain and judgment and disappointment. But when I looked up at her, there were tears in her eyes. Instead of judgment, I saw empathy and support. She understood that I needed help. And I'll never forget what she said next. She said, I can think of 10 people I think should go to treatment, and you would not be on that list. She supported me, and she basically said, okay, let's do this. Those of you that are employers and supervisors and team leaders or in any kind of leadership role, you have the power to be a transformative leader to team members who might be struggling with addiction. As I started to progress on my recovery journey, it was my addiction counselor who provided me with the skills and the tools that I needed to get sober and stay sober. Her compassion and empathy dignified my struggles and helped me to steadily climb out of the huge hole of the years of addiction and relapse had created in my life. And through her, I learned that my addiction was very connected to my mental health issues, my undiagnosed mental health issues, and trauma. And she helped me develop coping skills so that I could be resilient and I could find healthy ways to handle stress in my life. I know there are many addiction professionals in this audience, and there are many students enrolled here at Minot State in the Addiction Studies program. You can and do have the opportunity to help people feel like life is new again. Show people how to practice forgiveness for themselves and others, and equip people with the tools they need to lead a sober life. In my role as First Lady, I've had the privilege to use this platform to forward advocacy, and I have worked with so many incredible people to provide hope, healing, and help across our nation. And for that, I am so grateful. Well, in closing, I would like to thank you again for joining us today and issue you a challenge. Help end stigma through storytelling. Share your stories and encourage others and empower others to share how addiction has impacted their lives. In doing so, you will be helping to eliminate stigma so more people will reach out for help, and you will ultimately be saving lives. If there is anything I have learned through my struggle with addiction, it's that there is always hope for recovery. And recovery can look just like you and me. Through recovery, anything is possible. I am so grateful for the opportunity to serve the great state of North Dakota as First Lady. But I am even more grateful to just be Kathryn, a face and voice of recovery. Thank you. Thank you. Oh, thank you.